Hi, I'm Sandy Babb and welcome to my studio. I recently participated in Nik the Booksmith's Deserted Island Challenge. And her challenge was that we would get 4 given items and 4 items of choice to create a journal with. The 4 given items that she assigned us were a cutting tool, and I chose a pair of scissors, an adhesive, and I used a matte gel medium, paper, and it had to be one kind of paper, like coffee dyed or tea dyed, or if it was construction paper, whatever, it had to be the same kind of paper. And this is not the exact paper I used. My notebook was it was paper like this that was dyed. It was just a smaller notebook, and I don't have any left, so I just wanted to kind of show what I chose. I chose to use a hemp cord and a needle. You could choose any binding material that you needed, and I chose the hemp cord for a reason that the hemp cord is thick like this. Then it has 3 plies of thread on it. You can pull them apart. A single ply is great for fine stitching if you want to do some stitching in your journal. This, you leave it in 2 ply, it's kind of curly and wiggly. That makes a kind of a cool element. Or you can use it in the thickness. So I knew that I had a variety of ways that I could work with this hemp, so I chose hemp. So those are the things she gave us, and then she said we had to choose 4 items of our choosing. So I chose a brown paper lunch bag, a roll of black and white polka dotted washi tape, a self-peeling sketch charcoal pencil, and white gesso. And I chose this pencil for because I knew I couldn't have a pencil sharpener, and I knew that since this was self-sharpening, and if I needed to change the tip any, I could just scribble on paper to get my tip down so that I would be able to use this. And I really waffled on what to use for my cover. I had this amazing stained cardboard that this was going to be my choice, and then when I laid everything out, I realized, oh, those are 9 things, not 8. So I ditched the amazing cardboard and came up with an alternate plan for my journal. This is all I have left of my paper. Literally, this is it. These little tiny bitty bits. Now, it probably would have been legal to, I sharpened this pencil a couple times, and this is the paper that came off the pencil. Probably would have been legal to use this in the journal too, because she said, like, you could get really creative with this. So I did use the end of my pencil to make some dots. I did use my scissor handles as a bone folder to get good creases in my pages. I used the lid of my gesso here for stamping. I think there was something else that I did for circles, I think. No, maybe I just drew them with the pencil. But you could, get creative with the things that you have and use that. But when I put this orangey colored paper with the black and white and then the varying grays, because if you take this and you draw with it and you use a little bit of the gesso, you can change this black charcoal to varying grays. So I knew I could have from white to gray to black as a color palette, and so I thought it sort of was lending itself to Halloween, so I didn't use these. And the only other thing is I didn't choose an applicator. I had no applicator to put on my matte medium or my gesso. So what I did was I took the bottom part of this paper bag and I folded it and I taped it with some washi tape. And so I could squirt out my gesso and spread it with this. I could dip out a glop of glue and put it down and spread it, and this was my tool that I made. And of course your needle can be used for stitching, for binding, for punching your holes to bind your book. You could use it to score, you know, scratch there, you know, scratch through the gesso, scratch through the paint. There's a lot of ways that you can figure out to use your tools. You know, your scissors can be opened up and used to rough up edges of paper to make it look old. There's just so many things you could actually do. I was amazed at what you could do with 8 things. So now I'm going to share my journal with you, so I'm inviting you to sit right back and hear a tale of a fateful trip that started at a tropic port aboard what was supposed to be a tiny ship. Okay, I'm back to share my island life with you. And here's my story. I was prepared to spend some time on a 3-hour tour with a few other passengers. And I decided to stop at the gift shop to buy some postcards. I had with me my notepad, and I also had a charcoal pencil. I was going to spend this time sketching some things along our little charter route. While I was buying my postcards, I heard the ship's whistle for boarding blow. And somehow I found myself swept up in a large crowd of people that were pushing me away from the charter boat I was supposed to get on. I was tripping up a gangplank, very much like a salmon trying to swim upstream to go against the tide. And the next thing I know, I'm having a set of mouse ears plopped on my head. Confetti is being let loose. The gangplank is being raised. And I have found myself mistakenly on a Disney cruise ship. I am trying to think what in the world I'm going to do. A very kind lady befriended me, and she let me stay in her stateroom with her. And she just kind of took me under her wing and made everything okay with the captain, because I wasn't on the manifest, and you know, things were just terrible. I had nothing with me but my sketchbook and my charcoal pencil, and everything went wonderful for the first couple of days. On the 3rd day, we heard some sort of an alarm being sounded. There were people running through the hallways. There was a lot of commotion, knocking on doors as pursers went through the ship telling people that the ship had actually hit something. The ship was sinking. We were going to have to abandon the ship to get to the lifeboats. The lady I was with panicked. She threw me a fanny pack. Here's my fanny pack. Hang on to this. So I did. I held on to her fanny pack. And we made our way up to the place where we were supposed to get onto the lifeboats. And once we got there, there was a rope ladder going down. And I was one of the last people going over. I was trying to help other passengers, especially those with children, to get off. And, you know, I was there alone and, not with a family or anything. So I wanted the children to be safe and these families to be together. And when I started down the rope, I was so exhausted from helping and lifting that I slipped. And I found myself clutching a life ring, holding a fanny pack with a pair of mouse ears on my head. Now, I know that sounds kind of comical, but it was quite frightening. And I was trying to paddle toward the lifeboat when a great wave came and it started washing me away from the lifeboats. Long story short, I was left abandoned in the ocean by myself, by no one's fault. It just was a freak of nature. And I found myself washed up on a deserted island. And I was really hoping this lady's fanny pack had something really good in it, because all I had was a notepad and a charcoal pencil and a pair of mouse ears. Luckily for me, she had art supplies, because art is my happy place. So I thought, I can survive this if I can make art. And thankfully, the island I landed on was a very friendly island. I didn't run into any headhunters. I didn't run into any cannibals. The weather was fair. I found food and shelter. Things were plentiful, and it was kind of like a vacation. So here's my journal that I kept while I was there. I used my brown paper lunch bag. And man, I wish I hadn't eaten that sandwich so early. And some of the coffee dyed papers to make layers. And then I coated it inside and outside 3 times by spreading my matte medium over it to make it sort of pliable and thicker so that it would take stitching and that kind of thing. Okay. Then I used some of my brown paper bag to make a couple of accents. I made this rolled up paper to be like little pieces of bamboo. This is my message in a bottle that did me no good to throw out, because every day this thing would come back with the tide. The shells and the palm trees were plentiful. I took some of my hemp cord, and I was able to macrame myself a net. And I actually caught a couple of fish in there. And this is the back side of the journal. It's just done really simply. This was made by braiding some of the hemp. And I decided not to sew the signatures in because I didn't feel like this was going to be sturdy enough. I tied them in instead. Did some stitching, a little collage, a little sketching. Drew a fish and bottle and things on paper, and you know, gesso, washi tape, everything, just about everything. All my supplies are right here on the cover. And this is sort of a sketch diary of my time on the island. And this is where I was supposed to take off on my 3-hour tour. This was the end of the little port, and there goes the minnow without me. So there were supposed to be 5 people on board. There's only 4, and it took off without me. And what I did for my map was all these heavy coffee staining on the paper. I just let that be my outline. And I used some of the brown paper bag and some of the hemp for stitching to make some tabs. This is just a journal page with some gesso and collage with brown paper bag and washi. And the gray you see is where I've taken the charcoal, scribbled, and then used gesso on my finger and smudged it. There was a coconut grove on my island where I could get coconuts. They were a little hard to crack, and you can see I explored everywhere. Everywhere you see these little tick marks, this is places that I, you know, went around on this island trying to find a way off. This is the Twin Palm Landing, where I actually washed up on this portion of the island and went off in search of some sort of shelter, food, you know, your basic needs to be met. Thankfully, I'm always prepared, and I did have a fire starter with me in my pocket. Here I've made a little tuck spot with a little fold out piece of paper. It's just hinged with some washi painted with some of the gesso and charcoal. Another, just another journaling spot. Driftwood was plenty. Driftwood, banana leaves, and palm fronds. And so where I washed up on the twin palms, at first I was a little apprehensive about leaving the beach too much, hoping that someone would find me. So I stacked up driftwood to make myself a little hut with my back to the water so that the wind, you know, it would break the wind, and stuffed it full of palm leaves. So that was my shelter for a lot of the times. There were a couple other places on the island I could shelter. And here's some more just little doodles and paint, stitching, that kind of thing, places to journal. There was a beautiful waterfall on the island, and it was a great place to bathe or to get some fresh water if I needed it, if I was on this side of the island. Another journal spot, more journaling, some of the rope as an accent. I met a little friend on the island among the bamboo. It's a little lizard, and I named him Busby. He made this odd little buzzing sound that attracted these little tropical bugs, and then he would gulp them down. And so I seem to see him a lot of places on the island. This is just a book placeholder. This is the center of the book, and I drew some little cockle shells and glued those on, and more little doodle spots and writing. This is the bookmark. This was the last of my paper, that large pieces that I had left, and just sketched the tropical flower and made the little bookmark. I also practiced some knot tying while I was on this island. Made a little pocket here. This is called a lark's head knot. And I glued one sheet of paper, folded it in half, and glued it together to give this a little bit more thickness. It's not very thick. I mean, it's not tag thick, but it's better than if it had just been one little, you know, piece of paper. And just embellished with all my supplies that I had with me. The plumeria was plentiful on this island, and it was just beautiful scents and sights everywhere you went. The coconuts were delicious, but they were definitely a trial and error of being able to get them open to be able to use the coconut and the milk as a resource for nourishment. I created a little compass rose of sorts there and accented it with some of the rope and just tied some little knots on the rope. This is just a standard overhand knot on a tag in a pocket with a tab. Here's more journaling spots. There was a volcano on the island, but it was inactive, and I did circle out to it just out of curiosity, wanting to look around and see kind of what was on that portion of the island. There was also a portion of the island where if it got stormy, I could make it to these caves. This one cave here was quite deep and really a good shelter, and it wasn't very far from 4 fresh springs, so there was water there. More journaling. More journaling. This little cove was a wonderful little swim beach. It was on the side of the island that didn't seem to be buffeted as much by the winds and the waves, and it kind of curved in to make a little grotto sort of area, and so that was a frequently traveled path because it was very hot and humid on this island. It was a tropical island. On the opposite side of where the swim beach was, where there were a lot of winds, there were a lot of high piles of sand dunes, and it was a little more barren over there, it seemed like. So this was just a little cove that came in, and there were sand dunes there. More journaling spots. I took some of the native coral. There was a lot of white coral on this island. And so I spent some time marking out an SOS in what I thought would be one of the most visible spots. And there was a little island out. It was too far to swim to, but I could see it had one little palm tree. Was so curious about what was out there, but, you know, not brave enough to try to make it that far. There was one part of the island that I named it Blackbeard Bay because it just had this thick, viney jungle, and there was just something about it that seemed a little mysterious. And there was another little island off of it, and I thought, you know, that possibly that would be where Blackbeard would bury his treasure, so I marked an X there, you know. But it was just a kind of a creepy, mysterious place, and I only went there a couple of times, and I didn't really go in this part because of the way that it was so dense, and I just didn't feel comfortable there. More journaling spots, and one of my favorite things, I guess my 3 favorite things to do there, obviously besides, you know, art, were swimming, bird watching, and gathering shells. The puffer fish, they are very curious little fish. They would swim right up to your face and just puff, and I loved them, so I thought I would draw a puffer fish. And the low tide is always the best time to shell, and I had started a pretty collection of a calico scallop and a pretty tulip and a cowrie shell. And those are just a sketch of some of the things I found on the beach. There were a lot of tropical birds, and I really couldn't identify them because I don't know. This one had long, thin, plumey, colorful feathers. It was really a beautiful bird. Here's a little belly band with just a little bit of my leftover papers to make a little stitched together notebook, little extra. Another tab with some stitching and some paint and collage. More journaling pages. Some more journaling spots. Another one. The island was also really heavy with fiddlehead ferns. Now you have to know your ferns before you eat them because some of them are poisonous. But I know that ostrich ferns are a delicacy, and they're in season and served a lot in Maine in the spring. You have to harvest before they open up. They're in a tight coil. They're not uncoiled like this. They're in a little tight coil. And you cut them close to the ground. They are very high in iron and fiber. And my recipe for my 2 favorite ways to eat them were to cook them in coconut milk as a delicious leafy green, or steam them in a banana leaf with some fish seasoned with fresh lemongrass that grew on the island. So, but like I said, you have to know your ferns. Don't just go eating any fern, okay? The island was sort of a big U, almost U, sort of S shape. It came in deeply on one end, and this was just nothing but open sea out here. And I did walk the shores to see if I saw a ship or anything. And then, you know, there's only so many ways that you can walk along the beach and entertain yourself on an island. And the only thing that can explain this sketch is it must have been sunstroke. I created myself a dried banana leaf skirt and a shell top. I put on my Mickey Mouse ears and hulaed on the beach. Sunstroke. Here's another tag. This is just a traditional square knot with a little corner tuck. And there was a high cliff on one end of the island where you could see whales. So I named it Whale Watch Cliff. And there was another end of the island where Shipwreck Point, there was an old shipwreck there. You could see it at low tide, parts of it would stick out of the water, and then at high tide you could just see a shadow under there. And so I knew that there had been at some point you know, a boats or some sort of traffic near this island. And here is my tie. This is just a braid of 3 of the full ply of the hemp cord. And I reinforced the hoe with washi, just so it would maybe not, washi and glue, so it would not come undone. And this was my experience on the island. And obviously I was rescued because I lived to tell the tale and to show you this journal. So thanks so much, Nik the Booksmith. This was a fantastic challenge, and I really enjoyed it, and thanks for hosting.